I've said this about Bryce Young. I know he's going to be good. The question is how long. Remember when Tom Brady, Aaron, was in his prime, New England drafted a quarterback every other year, some in the second round, some in the third. Now, Tom's a complete outlier historically, but Bryce Young's the most talented quarterback in this draft. He was in high school. He was in college. I think his pocket awareness is a little bit higher than everybody else, his accuracy, his big game experience. I don't think he's a 15-year quarterback in this league.
Nope.
But if he's a 7-year quarterback, 6 high-end years, you take him. What you don't want, Aaron, in the NFL, it's not college where I get a new quarterback every year. But this idea that everybody's a 401k. When OBJ came to the Rams, nobody thought it was a long-term deal. We need to be better at our number 2 receiver now. You go get edge rushers now. When you draft a rookie quarterback, you know this, you have about 4 years you don't pay him. What do? You load up your roster. Not all those edge rushers are lifetime deals. You want a guy that can win the ring. The Rams pushed everything in the middle for a championship. That's all they cared about. So if you tell me Bryce Young, I draft him. As a rookie, he's capable. And then I get 4 to 5 years of really high B-plus quarterback play. There's only 6 guys in the world, Aaron, that can play Mahomes level. There's like in the whole planet, there's 6. I think Caleb Williams could be that. Trevor's becoming that. You may get 2 of those guys a decade. If you can get a guy that can start for 6 years, I think you got to go for it.
I get it. Like talent-wise, I'm with you, man. Like he's uber talented. I love the creativity. I love the ability to extend plays. But he weighed in at 204, and you and I both know he's not going to play at 204. There's a reason why he didn't do any of the combine stuff. He's going to be 185, 190. So not only is he 5'10", his playing weight is 185. The thought of him being able to shrug off defenders like he did in college is not going to happen to me. So I don't even know if there's 7 really good years there. And you're talking about the next 6 years. Say you do get 6 years out of Bryce Young. Those 6 years are also going to be trying to win a championship against some of the best quarterbacks that I've seen in the past decade plus.
Right.
You're going to be competing against the Patrick Mahomes. You're going to be competing against the Josh Allens, the Trevor Lawrences of the world. So, and most likely you're going to be in the AFC. So they're in their prime, and they're going to be in their prime for probably another 4, 5, 6 years. So if you're only going to give me 6 years, and those 6 years are going to be Patrick Mahomes' prime of his career 6 years, and Josh Allen, and Trevor Lawrence, and all these other guys that are built to last, that are just as athletic, but 6 inches taller, that are 40 pounds heavier, that have game experience on them. I take them every day of the week. So I need you to last a little bit longer, because if I want to win a championship, I don't know if that window is in the next 6 years. It's going to be tough. I know the AFC right now, to me, there's 5 teams that can win it in the next 5 years. That's Kansas City, that's the Bengals, that's Buffalo, that's San Diego, that's maybe Jacksonville. But you need that top tier quarterback. And I just don't know if he's going to get to that level fast enough while these other guys in their prime.
Well,
and I worry about the size. I do. There's not been many 5'10" quarterbacks besides Doug Flutie that have had success in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't need him to get to their level. What I need is he competent and cheap? Because if he's cheap and B, I can load my roster up. And by the way, by his 2nd to 3rd year, I'm drafting other quarterbacks in the 3rd round. Where Russell Wilson came from, where Dak came from, where Kirk Cousins' 4th round comes from. So even in Brady's prime, Jimmy Garoppolo, 2nd round, Ryan Mallett, they were drafting quarterbacks. I don't need him. It's one of these things. Just because I have a 401k doesn't mean I can't day trade. I mean, me and my wife, when we first started, when we were first married, we had our house, we had a second place, and then we occasionally flipped a house. Because she's in real estate, a subcontractor, and a designer. So it became a business for us. It didn't affect our primary. It didn't affect our second place, like our condo on the beach. Bryce Young doesn't have to be everything. He doesn't have to be the future. He doesn't have to be the answer. What he has to be is competent and inexpensive. And in that time, I can attract free agents. Well, free agents don't go to bad teams. If Bryce can make me viable, if Bryce is cheap and I can load my roster, hell, Brock Purdy on a loaded roster. Look what he got you. Right. So I think I used to think like you, like if a guy's not great, what's the point? What you can't be in this league is awful. Because if you're awful, total turnoff to free agents, right? Mm-hmm. If you're awful, scouting director fired, GM fired, chaos, right? Then you have no continuity. But if I'm Minnesota, I'm not going to win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins, but I get free agents. Nobody's getting fired. I have stability. I have continuity. That's okay. I fill my stadium. What you don't want to be is Houston. So instead of having these wild ebbs and flows, if Bryce Young for 4 to 6 years makes me Minnesota, I win one playoff game. But you know what? Free agents are like, let's say he goes to Houston. Free agents are like, no state tax. Mm-hmm. I'm a wide receiver. He's accurate. They pay people because I see him paying all these free agents. It becomes a positive experience and a positive franchise. And so for an Atlanta, Indianapolis right now, it's all negative. Irsay's crazy. Chris Ballard, they're firing coaches. It's like, it's toxic. You don't have to be Kansas City. You got to get out of toxic. And I think Bryce Young can get you out of there for 6 years.
Speaking of narratives, there's the narrative of Alabama quarterbacks, and you get to be Nick Saban's guy. You get all the 5 stars around you, and then you look at Mac, and you look at Tua, and I think that narrative is wrong when it comes to this case right now, because those guys did have a lot of talent around them. And yes, Bryce may have had that, I would say, last year with some of the receivers, but he was a baller this year with an average offensive line by Alabama standards, with really not a ton of talent, at least top 3-4 round talent at the receiving position around him. He did have Gibbs out of the backfield, he was tremendous and is an incredible athlete and weapon. But really, those other guys had first rounders. They had guys they can throw a bubble to, and all of a sudden they're completing 70+% completion, throwing slants and bubbles, and those guys taking it to the house. He had to be Superman. So there is that narrative I feel like it's going around as, oh, he's just another Alabama quarterback. Why draft that? I think he's different because of the team that he was placed on this year, not being Nick Saban's necessarily best with talent on offense. How do you see that narrative playing out, and does that affect him based on what we've seen from some of these other guys that have made it to the league in the past 5 years?
Well, there's never been an Ohio State quarterback that was great in the NFL. I do think part of what makes an NFL quarterback is the ability to overcome. Dak Prescott with a bad O-line at Mississippi State. Will Levis, bad offensive line at Kentucky. You learn, you make some more mistakes, but you learn to overcome. Matt Ryan, Boston College. Phillip Rivers, NC State. Big Ben, Miami of Ohio. Josh Allen, Mahomes. They didn't play with NFL 5-star guys. So I think it's a disadvantage to play at Ohio State or Alabama. I do think so. Or LSU, generally. Burrow is an exception. Where you play with, on most Saturdays, you have significantly better protection and significantly more wide open receivers. But be that as it may, Alabama also is almost a semi-NFL experience. Saban, facilities, pressure. So I look at Alabama and I think, boy, it's as close to the NFL as you're going to get, right? Like every game counts, coaches barking, high expectations, nutrition. It's pretty NFL light. So when USC had Pete Carroll, that Kirk Herbstreit and I used to always joke, it ain't college and it's not the NFL. It's somewhere in between. Yeah. And they put a lot of guys in the league. So, USC and Ohio State and Bama don't have a history of great NFL quarterbacks. But if a kid's special, he's special. And so I don't want to punt it. Matt Stafford, Georgia, it's not like he played with a bunch of schlubs. Good is good. Bryce Young's really good. I think we have to individualize it. He's way better than Tua to me as a prospect. He's way better than A.J. McCarron. I like Bryce Young far better than any of the Alabama quarterbacks.
I like Mac, and I think Mac was put in an interesting situation this year. I don't know. I was a big fan of what he did back at Alabama. He doesn't have the
He
the
doesn't move as
athleticism.
well as Bryce.
No,
Bryce
he doesn't have
moves
the
better.
athleticism that I like. That is if you can pick one or the other, you're picking the guy that can make someone miss, extended play, get a receiver that at split second more to get open down the field. A guy that can do that and someone that really blew up. We knew he was going to put up crazy stats, maybe not as good as what we saw this past weekend at the combine, is Anthony Richardson, maybe the most athletic quarterback that we've ever seen, especially at that size, at 6'4", 244 pounds, bigger than Ben Roethlisberger, same size as Von Miller. We've seen the comparisons, lit up the combine. Now it's the debate of where do you go? Some coaches and GMs say, listen, I'm just watching the tape. I got all the tape I need. Why the hell do I want to watch a kid in shorts? What does that matter? Other guys are like, hey, I see the potential. Give me him and let me see what we can do. Where do you fall on that line of tape, 54% guy, compared to you have a guy that is maybe the most athletic guy in the draft right now?
Well, let's talk about short term. So I think the comparisons to Cam are about athletic ability, but I think Cam was a far more refined quarterback, far more consistent, productive, one of the top 5 college players for an individual season I've ever seen. Very Vince Young, just completely, utterly Reggie Bush dominant. Didn't look like a college player. Jamar Chase doesn't even look like a college player. You're like, that's a pro playing college. So let's say Seattle has, because of the Russell Wilson deal, Aaron, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a third, and 2 fourths. So let's say they take Anthony Richardson with the 5 pick. Well, they're not going to have 2 firsts very often, and Pete Carroll will never draft in the top 5 again. Let's say Anthony Richardson sits for 2 years behind Geno Smith, and you use him on certain packages, and he's highly effective in the red zone. Very Cam Newton, just a nightmare. Remember Cam came in the league the first 2 years? I mean, literally in the red zone, it was like, we give up. He was 260 running over linebackers and corners. So let's say Anthony Richardson, you bring him in, and for 2 to 3 years, he can't beat out Geno Smith. But he is a red zone nightmare. An occasional start. Okay. You have 2 firsts and 2 seconds, a third and 2 fourths. This is the year you go for it. He's not ready to play now, but is he an NFL athlete? Oh my God, yes, he's an NFL athlete. Get him in the lock. Listen, I was never a Tebow fan, but I said this day one. I'd take him on my roster. His work ethic. He could be an up man and a punt, an H-back, a tight end, a backup quarterback. If he touched the ball 4 times a Sunday, it's something. We got backup linebackers who are just special teams guys. We got long snappers. Is Anthony Richardson an elite professional athlete? Absolutely. You draft him. Seattle's got a quarterback and another first-round pick. If he touches the ball 40 times a year in the first 2 to 3 years and scores 9 touchdowns, which, by the way, with his frame, absolutely possible. Is he not making me a better football team? Isn't he? I don't need him to be Mahomes. I need him to help me win games.
Get that. But you brought up I think you brought up a good point there, the Cam Newton comparison, and Cam was more refined. Cam played a little bit sparingly at Florida. He played in the JUCO, then obviously had the full season there at Auburn, but he had 2 full seasons of playing football. What Anthony needs right now is to play football. I told T-Bob this was back when I was like 12 years old. My brother got drafted into the MLB right out of high school, and he's seen a personal trainer. I went to see the personal trainer, was enjoying it, told my dad, like, hey, I want to take the year off football. I just want to train. I want to get big and strong and fast and work on this. I'm going to show up the next year and just blow everyone away. And my dad's like, no, the only way you're going to get better at football is by playing football, not by working out and training and not playing and not getting on the field.
Right.
And that's what Anthony Richardson needs. He needs to play. He doesn't need to play, in my opinion, 40 snaps a season and ride the bench and learn from Geno and just sit back with a clipboard and observe. He needs to get on the field and make mistakes. He needs to go out there and throw interceptions. He needs to go out there and be given the football and just say, we trust you, go out there and do your thing. So it's the balance. It's, if you told me that as a fan base, I'm going to close my eyes for 3 years and I'm going to ignore everything that this kid does, and just enjoy the process. Sit back. I don't care if Bryce Young's rookie of the year. I don't care if Will Levis turns into a Pro Bowler in year 2 or year 3, and we missed out on him. I don't care. We are going to trust the process. We're going to give this kid 3 years to do.
But you can't do that.
Maybe
because
I know that's a problem. You can't. But he has to play. He has to play. He's not going to get better.
A GM would never do that because he'd get fired. A GM would get fired.
That's the problem.
A coach would get fired. So nobody will do that. They just won't.
That's the problem. That's what I'm saying. Like, no one will do that, but that's what he needs. He's not going to get better playing spiritually. But
that's because he made a mistake. He should not have gone pro.
No.
Right.
Nope.
So Anthony Richardson.
He didn't make a mistake for his longevity he may have, but for the immediate paycheck when he's a potential top 5 pick, no, he didn't. For financial reasons, immediately he made he made the right decision. For longevity of his career, to make it to that second paycheck and get $50+ million a year, he should have stayed at Florida for another year or 2. He needs to play football.
The real money in the NFL is not your first check. So if you short term it and you think about things in terms, I'm 21 and I got, 28 million, you'll burn through that shit in 6 years. So he made a really bad business decision long term. He'll get short term money, but nobody's going to go after him after 2 to 3 years. He should have stayed at Florida, but since he didn't, the NFL is going to use him they're going to use him the way they want to. Now, had he stayed in 1 more year and come out, then he's going to have way more leverage because he's way more refined. But what's going to happen now is people are going to see him as an athlete who's not ready to play, and he's going to become packaged. Like, okay, we'll use him for this package and that package. I think it stuns his growth? Maybe. It should be noted, the NFL, Aaron, played 55 quarterbacks this year. He will start games. This is not Stetson Bennett with protection. He will start games in the first 2 years. At some point, he will. So you could argue, if let's say I'm his agent, hey, he's going to blow everybody away. He's going to turn heads. First year, he won't play much. By the second year, somebody gets hurt and he plays. And if he plays well enough, and Justin Fields has struggled with some pocket stuff, but let's be honest, they're going to give him another year in Chicago because he's a highlight reel every Sunday for a handful of plays. So I think Seattle's the team for Richardson that's fascinating. You start looking at Geno Smith and you say, well, Geno does some things like, his passer rating's pretty good, but man, in the red zone, wouldn't it be great to have a pseudo Cam Newton or 75% Cam Newton in the red zone? I think Seattle would become really difficult to defend. Think about this. I'm preparing for Seattle. I literally am preparing for 2 quarterbacks. It would be a nightmare. And you just tell Geno, this kid's going to help you. You're going to be in the red zone, and we're going to guarantee you at 75% touchdowns, not field goals. I think Geno would like it after a while when he starts winning.
But Geno ain't getting those touchdowns, though. So stats at the end of the season are, hey, this kid's got 10 rushing touchdowns, and you only have 10 passing touchdowns because he took 10 of those off your plate for you. So listen, if you win and you're still the starting quarterback of a playoff team,
feels good.
Unless you're Trent Dilfer, you're going to be fine.
And Geno is going to get guaranteed money. I imagine his agent is aware of this. You just don't have a production or a stat-based bonus structure. Give us the money. In the NFL now, Aaron, guys get money up front, guaranteed money up front. They don't care much about Pro Bowls and stats. If you give me $65 million after taxes, I don't care. I'm set for life.
All right, who you? It sounds like Bryce is your guy at 1. If you had to pick a quarterback, who are you next? If you're a quarterback in any team, are you going to take that gamble on Anthony, or are you going CJ?
I think I've said Bryce is the most talented and capable of playing now. Will and CJ Stroud are capable of succeeding with the right environment. They're not good enough to overcome nonsense or chaos. Richardson's the most fascinating, biggest potential to be exciting and exhilarating, but really raw. You have to be the most patient with him, but he's the most interesting. And I think next year, Caleb Williams and Drake May are A++ prospects. You don't, that's like having two Andrew Lucks in the same class. You get about two can't miss guys a decade, and I think we're going to have two next year.
That's why I like, man, if you are a team that, unless you're desperate, you kind of, to me, you roll the dice on next year and you trade it all for one of those two guys. I'm with you. I think those guys are so generational that they would be easily 1-2 this year and leave everyone else in the dust. So I think those guys 100% make your team better. I think Bryce, I'm concerned about size, longevity. Anthony, I'm concerned about accuracy issues, playbook issues. Will, I'm concerned about taking care of the damn football. I think CJ is just really good at a lot of things, maybe the least risky of all of them, but none of them I feel good about winning a Super Bowl in the first 4 years unless you build a super team around them where those guys can make you better day one, I feel like, and can lead you to Super Bowl regardless of the situation they put you in. Last one, obviously, before I let you go, Colin. The combine, I brought it up at the beginning of it about, do you draft off combine? Do you draft off the tape that you've watched of these players? Your general feeling of talking with GMs and scouts and coaches of how they view and how do you view that essentially week-long festivity there in Indianapolis?
Well, I view sports, I've been doing this now 30 years. Boxing used to be bigger. Men's tennis in America used to be bigger when we had Connors and McEnroe and Agassi. I just ran into Pete Sampras in the grocery store today. I mean, we haven't had a star like that in a long time. Serena, obviously, on the women's side. And so sports are cyclical. College basketball was much bigger 30 years ago when Patrick Ewing would come back for his sophomore year, his junior year. Now it's very transactional. And so I look at the combine as something that is less important to me today than it was 5 years ago, and here's the reason. It's become a cottage industry to prepare for the combine, so I don't feel I'm getting an authentic experience. If you went to, Trent Dilfer always says 75% of NFL players don't love football, they love what it provides for them. If I went to you, Aaron, and I said, listen, Aaron, I know you don't love football, but if you give me 10 weeks of conditioning at the highest level, I'll get you a big, fat first, second round check. Even a player who's apathetic is going to completely commit for 10 weeks to getting the best shape of his life. I think it's a beauty contest. You get players who are in the best shape, not their normal shape. I want tape. I want to see you play hurt because in the SEC, you're playing hurt by week 2. I want to see players who match up against Georgia players when they're inferior. The left tackle's inferior, and here comes, a Will Anderson off the edge. That's the real NFL. You're not dominant physically. You're often overwhelmed. I want to see that. I want to see left tackles against LSU edges and Georgia edges. So the combine, it's like a beauty pageant. You know the questions that are coming. You've got the tanning lotion on. Everything's perfect. The lighting's perfect. The host is perfect. That's not the real world. Now, you do sometimes. Vernon Davis out of Maryland, tight end with his shirt off. You're like, whoa. Okay, I thought Christian Gonzalez, the corner out of Oregon, was a whoa. I mean, he's 205, 6'1". Aaron, he looks like he's 6 pounds from an NFL safety. And he's running 4.35. Like, that is the best corner in the draft. Like his physically, you were just like, I watched the DB, I'm like, all right, that guy, that is just genetically different. So there are these wow moments. There's a handful over the weekend. But by and large, I want authentic game tape. And I think increasingly, Belichick, Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, they're passing on it because they feel they're getting manipulated by the process. And so do I as a consumer.
When you look at the 40s nowadays, it feels like everyone's running 4.4s, 4.3s, 4.2s. And you're just like, whatever they're teaching at these exos or whatever it is, the start, what you are training for that. And I don't know how much of learning how to get off the blocks from 5 yards in a 3-point stance is really going to help a receiver at these days. But who knows? I'm with you. Give me tape all day long. I lied. One more before I let you go. Just have to get at least one college question in here. We know you're the head of the Petite Trojan boys with our boy T-Bob there. USC, Caleb back. We discussed him a little bit. Pac-12 may be the grand finale this year. They got a ton of great quarterbacks up and down that conference heading into next season. does USC have enough on the defensive side of the football to finally push through and really compete for a championship?
Well, the first year they brought in sort of average defensive players. They got a really good corner out of Colorado. He'll probably go in the 4th round. They went and they had an NFL defensive lineman who will go in the 1st round or early 2nd. So they had a couple of them. And this year they have a kid. He'll be the top safety in the country, Kalen Bullock. He will be a 1st round pick in next year's draft. The quality of the defensive players they brought in this portal, these are NFL bodies. So they brought in a corner from Arizona. Mm-hmm. He's about a 2nd to 3rd round corner. They brought in a linebacker, a leading tackler in the Big 12 from Oklahoma State. He'll play on Sundays. They brought a couple of NFL defense bodies on the interior D-line. They'll play on Sundays. They're not Georgia 1st round players, but they're NFL bodies. So we know they'll be good enough. They'll be as good offensively as anybody in the country. In fact, I think they shored up their offensive line with 3 transfers, all of them sort of like, Sunday bodies. Last year when I watched them, the story was Caleb Williams' brilliance and Lincoln Riley's brain. They just didn't have a lot of NFL bodies. This team has 15 NFL bodies. Now, some are underclassmen, some are not. But when I look at the quality and the size of their O-line, they have 4 NFL bodies. Last year they had 1. The defensive line now will have 3 NFL bodies. Last year they had 1. And so I guess my point is you can't figure out everything, Aaron, in one transfer portal cycle. Mm-hmm. And you saw this with LSU. USC solved the offensive side of the ball, but defensively they didn't. This year, the transfer portal was really about solving the defensive side of the ball. I still think in a 14-game schedule, they're a nose tackle short. That's what I feel they really miss. If you could give them, not a Jalen Carter, that's not going to happen, but if you could give them a 3rd-round nose tackle, and I look at their schedule, I'm like, yeah, I think they could get there. The difference is if you win the conference, then you have the Pac-12 championship, then a semifinal game, then a national title. That is 3 great teams in a row. And as you know, that's where the Georgias and Alabamas and Ohio States are different. They have that depth of talent. I still think they're a year away from that, but to make no doubt, they will be noticeably better on defense. These transfers are, in fact, 3 or 4 of the transfers last year are suddenly now backups. So they were starters last year. Linebacking core will look completely different. Defensive line, 3 new starters, 1 from Purdue, 1 from A&M, and Arizona's best defensive player. So they're closer. But let's remember, Kirby Smart, it wasn't until he got 3 full classes in, and then year 3 and year 4, you're like, whoa, they're as fast as Bama. So last year, 2 plays from 13 wins, but they deserve to lose. They just poor tackling, small, no depth. This year, they'll be a little bigger, a little deeper. Do I think they'll beat Georgia, Bama? No. But I think they could, because of Caleb, I think they could compete with Georgia. They'll at least look the part, but they still lack the defensive depth of Georgia and Bama and Ohio State. But last year, I don't think they would have looked the part. You would have seen them play Georgia, and you're like, oh, they're better than TCU, but you would have been like, they're a little slow. I think they'll look the part this year, especially on offense, but also a little on defense.
Yeah, a little slow and not as physical. And I think you said the defense, if Caleb, because I was not sold on Caleb his freshman year at Oklahoma. I thought he was a little bit reckless. I thought he was a little bit too much backyard football, a little bit all over the place, refined it just a little bit and took a massive step forward. If he can get better, just a fraction of what he did from freshman to sophomore year and build on that last year, we said it, generational talent. Like I think he can even fill in some of those gaps on both sides of the football that they may be lacking as well. So if he can just get a little bit better and just stop painting his damn fingernails, we'll be good to go. So, Colin, man, appreciate you jumping on with us or with me, and have a great week and get ready for the NFL draft.
Love having you in the volume. You and T-Bob are a riot. I've got one college football podcast and it's the one we really sought. I'm just so proud of you guys. You're timely, you're smart, you're passionate, and it's great. We are so lucky to have you, man.
Oh, we appreciate you supporting us, and make sure you continue to watch or listen to AMP, and then follow the Volume YouTube, social medias, Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe. Daily content every single day across all the sports. Snaps, your number one college podcast. Appreciate it, Colin. Have a great week.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.